Stillwater's Morning Scramble at 9:47, and it's time for little Tom Dirato. Not little Tom Dirato, that's in somewhere nice. It's time for an interview with Tom Dirato. Morning,
Well,
Tom.
that sounds good. I was getting a little concerned here.
Like little
Maybe I
Richard?
shrunk here a little bit. Yeah.
Little Stevie Wonder, little Tom Dirato. Now that didn't work. So
No, not as well as the former.
there you go. Hey, I saw you around here yesterday, but we didn't really talk because you were lining up some great interviews. I know you had Joey Graham on and been talking to a lot of folks, but we haven't talked on the air this week. So I know a lot of people have probably been picking your brain, haven't they?
Well, we have, and that's good because it's like anytime you lose a member of your family, it's good for everybody to talk about them, and it makes you get through it a little easier. Not easy, but easier as we all have. I'm sure we all have gone through that in our own immediate families. But it's a celebration of life, and that's pretty much what it's been the last day or so, a couple of days. And painful, but still, it's good to bring up some of the stories and the things that you remember and you've locked away a little bit in your memory bank, and it's good to unlock them when other people are asking about them.
Yeah, and you obviously have a very special relationship. You talked about the media, and and everybody has their own story and their own different relationship. But being the guy that covered and hosted his show for so many years, and what I remember, because I always listened to the radio show, I saw the TV show some of the time, but I always heard the radio show, and it was almost reversed in the fact that you guys were so comfortable. He had no problem in razzing you a little bit, and that was part of the fun of the relationship and for listening also.
Yeah, we had a great relationship, a great friendship, and it was one that we give a little and take a little, and I used to have James Dickey was the first one ever told me, said you say things to him that nobody would even think about saying. And I said, but first of all, I don't necessarily work for him like you do. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, we hit it off almost immediately. We didn't always agree on things, as I said yesterday. We certainly are on both opposite sides of the aisle politically, and we didn't agree with baseball teams that we liked. And speaking of baseball, the part that nobody's brought up too, you tend to forget he was the AD at Creighton when he was basketball coach. And one of the great perks of being there, and he used to say, I guess for 4 years he was there, 3 or 4 years.
Bob Gibson is coming up, I'll bet.
No, he was on the committee, the national, as the host for the College World Series.
Oh,
he
okay.
was on that committee. And he got chance, those fellas who sit in the first row behind the plate, he had that going the whole time he was there. And he was a big baseball fan, as you well know.
See, that's why I thought you were going with Bob Gibson, because Bob Gibson was a Creighton alum, played basketball there, and still lived in Omaha. Correct. So I assume probably because Eddie was also a great Cardinal fan, I assume they probably had a friendship, would be my guess.
I'm certainly sure that they crossed paths a number of times and knew each other. But he used to say that was as being a baseball fan, that's something he really looked forward to, was sitting in. He had those front row seats with the committee, and because the committee has to make decisions and this and that when questions come up. But he looked forward to that all the time. He said he missed that when he left Creighton. A lot of people don't remember that, but he understood the what went on at the AD's office. But that was a perk, the way he put it, to be able to go to the College World Series and be part of that committee as being the host team. Yeah. And that would be coming up here shortly if we were having one.
Yeah, it sure would. So I don't know if you've done outside interviews. You've been on here, obviously, and the TV 31 stuff. But I assume you were one of the guys people were going to call, I would imagine.
Did one with the station in Wichita last night, and it was a lot of reminiscing. And obviously Buckland, I don't really know where Buckland is in relation to Wichita, but it's probably
2 or 3 hours. Yeah,
I would imagine. And they focus on his mom a lot because I guess they've interviewed her over the years. But he's a statewide hero there still, because he was recruited by Mr. Iba, Ralph Miller. I mean, you talk about a couple of the giants of the business when Kansas State and Wichita State and Oklahoma State. I don't know if Kansas really came a calling that much. I mean, back in the day, I'm sure they knew who he was. But when you stop to think, you got recruited by some of the coaching legends.
I think an
Like
article I saw Kansas did because yeah, you're talking about Fog Allen
yeah,
and
how about that? I mean,
and Henry Iba.
Chris,
Who else
yeah,
was in there? I mean, there are people that statues are made of, and those were the
and they came calling and wanting you to go to their school. So I mean that sometimes gets lost in the.
Tex Winter was another one that
That's
recruited.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get lost in that a little bit. There aren't too many people who've been recruited in any sport by a series of coaching legends like he was.
Well, I remember hearing on your show that you did with him on the radio show because that was a great show. I mean, it was an hour. You talked, you covered basketball probably 20 minutes of it, and the other
Yeah,
part was a
yeah,
lot of history and stuff. And I love that combination. It really was a good show. But I can remember him talking about going. I don't know where it was. Maybe the Big 8 tournament before he was even a big time coach, and sharing a room with those. I mean, in like a media room with all those people we just
yeah.
mentioned, and it was like Mount Rushmore, and he would just soak it in.
When I repeat that story several times, I still am. I have to pinch myself. Think, I mean, these are coaching greats, as you said. These are people who have statues made by them, for them. I mean, and are revered at their schools. And of course, Mr. Iva won out having him here. And I think the tipping point, because we used to discuss this a lot, the tipping point was he felt like his style of play fit what Mr. Iba did, and that was defense first, rebounding, that kind of stuff, and then scoring, every once in a while, being a smart player. But he was tempted. I mean, to the point where it wasn't just a done deal that he was coming here. And when he got here, I'm sure Mr. Iba was very relieved because Mr. Iba understood the competition he had. He was going
Right.
against. But you stop and think about that. There aren't many players, even in the history of the game, that had that many people either calling or visiting or having you visit and want your services. That's a Hall of Fame group of coaches right there.
And who knows what would have happened with Eddie with Eddie being Eddie, he would have been successful no matter what. I mean, he would have been on a great coach, I think, anywhere. But obviously, the Iba influence was the topper there. But if he would have gone to Kansas, he'd have been a teammate of Wilt Chamberlain instead of
Right.
playing against him.
Mhm.
Who knows how life would have ended up different? Certainly would have ended up different for Oklahoma State because we probably wouldn't have got that final chapter.
That is correct, and it's kind of fun to look at that and what if this happened, what if that happened, and we're glad we got him, and he certainly filled it in nicely here, and was a guy who came back and enjoyed being back here. It was Oklahoma State was in his blood for sure. But what would have happened if he not? Would there have been another Eddie Sutton somewhere out there? Who knows? I'm sure Mr. Iba would have found. And he wasn't the star here either. I mean, we tend to think that, but he wasn't the star on the teams here. He was one of many good players, and he'd be the first to tell you. Now, on those coaches shows, somebody gave me this number. Somebody had a number, and I don't know why they looked it up. Might have been for a story that somebody did way back when, or right after I got retired. But we did like 410 coaches shows on radio, and
Yeah, no, that would make sense. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but when you do them, and we were such good friends, and we always. There wasn't a day in the 16 years he was here I was not spend part of the day with him. During the season, obviously, we spent a lot of hours together. But even out of season, we go. I'd go up his office, sit around, just shoot the breeze, and we'd see each other. So it was natural on the coaches show that it was just like sitting down with two people just talking, and there weren't many topics that were off base. I don't think. I don't know.
I thought that was one of the magical. It's hard to describe lightning in a bottle, but I think that's one of the things that related. Besides winning, you got to win.
Yes, sir.
But the fact that he had interest in whether it was music or whether it was movies.
Westerns. He was all. I mean, he was all over Western.
And he went to the Carmike. I don't think there's anybody in that day that went to a movie that they didn't at least see the Suttons there once, right?
Yeah, and if it was a Western, he might have been there twice
right.
for the same movie. But it's fun to kind of go through some of the things. The popcorn eating that he had. He was just a great popcorn eater.
By the way, some of that popcorn in the old media room.
Yeah, well, he used to have that bag in his office.
Well,
right?
Some of it, I think, was left over. I don't know if you ate it very much, but I think some of it was left over from the Iba years.
Well,
because it
Yeah,
was
there
a
was
big
some that
old
tasted
bin.
that
Yeah.
way. Yeah, as a matter of fact, last year I think we had a kernel of corn that was left over from the Iowa ears. But he was he was so interesting and so diverse and could talk about anything. Obviously his contacts and politics and he had that. He could talk politics with you if you wanted to. And when we get into back and forth a little bit, I don't think we ever did that on the air, but we sure as heck did it in his office or at practice. But he was such a guy who could talk about any sport, and I've heard it said, and I agree. He's the kind he could have been a successful coach in any sport that he coached, anything, because he had that formative
Right.
approach that if you're dedicated and you do this and you're disciplined and you do what the coach tells you and you play the role that's laid out for you, then you'll be a successful team and thus be a successful coach. So I don't think there's any doubt whatever he coached, he would have been successful. I remember when we were talking about his, I said, "You were a golf coach." I said that was pretty easy for you to just become a golf coach, right? Because he's a pretty good golfer at one time when you were over at Tulsa Central. He said, "Well, they came to me and they said they needed somebody to drive the van to the golf course." And at the time, that was an extra whatever stipend, whatever they made,
Right.
which wasn't much, but on top of being a basketball coach. So I said, "Well, how much coaching did you do in golf?" He said, "Well, we get to the first tee and I'd let them all tee off, then I'd go play. And I'd go play, work on my own game." He said, and then when it was over, I'd put him back in the van and take him back to the school. And but he was really a good golfer, good tennis player. He had a tennis court in his backyard, for crying out loud. And so he was a good athlete all the way around. And just like any good athlete, they would tell you that to some extent. He was proud of the fact that he was pretty good at what he did.
Yeah.
But he was so relatable. Is that even a word? I guess
It is, and it fits very
he was
much
so
so.
relatable to people outside. And I've gotten, oh my goodness, I got more texts in the last 3 days than maybe I've ever had in my life, because I'm not a big texter, but from people that knew him or knew of him or didn't know him at all, but felt like they knew him. And he had that ability to make you feel important, even though you didn't know who you were initially, and might not have remembered your name for 5 minutes, but he remembered the meeting, and the next time you met,
Right.
he would make you feel like he'd known you all his life. And people, that's a gift, I think. And that came. I had an interesting question from the guy at the host there at Wichita yesterday, and he said, "Where do you think he got that?" And I said, "Well, I know for a fact that his mom was very big in his life, and his dad was a disciplinarian, and his ag background, if you will, created that ethic. That we got to work to get it done. Nothing's gonna be given to us." And there's no question he brought that with him all the way to the final minute there last Saturday night at home. He just worked. He was just strong discipline mentally, and I understand. And we used to joke about it. I don't believe that he got up at 3 every morning and milked the cows and fed the chickens and walked 5 miles to school and all that. But I do believe that they didn't have any indoor plumbing. He was proud of the 2-holer outhouse that had in the back. He used to tell me all about all the time. But I do think his growing up years and his parents instilled that in him, that you could see it. All the way up to my relationship with him, and that's why I say he would have been a success. And he was, the part that people didn't understand about him, and I think didn't know, he used to get a bunch every year of companies that would call him, especially during the off season, to come speak and motivate their companies. Now, that's and he would. He could tell stories, and again, some were embellished, but for the most part, he had that relatable, believable, get up front of an accounting firm and give it that do better and get after it. And I'm sure they felt better about him when he left the boardroom than he did before they came in. But he was a one of a kind, Steve. And I know I'm biased there, but he was a one of a kind, and one of my dear. I don't have a whole lot of dear friends, but he is one of the dearest friends I've ever had in my life, and it's been tough last couple of days, but being able to tell stories kind of helps the celebration of his life, and that's what we're doing right now.
Amen. And we'll continue to do that when I talk to you on Friday. How's that?
Okay, we can do that. Yes,
Sounds
sir.
good. Hey, thanks for the visit and all you do.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
All
I
right.
appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
There you go. There's one and only Tom Dirato. Appreciate that visit.